The saloon smelled of tobacco and cruelty. Sheriff Harlan Kent leaned back in his chair, boots propped on the poker table, whiskey glass catching the lamplight like a promise he'd never keep. His voice carried over the murmur of cards and coin, loud, deliberate, meant to wound. "Grant McCoy, you're the last bachelor with land worth claiming." Kent's grin spread wide. "Choose any woman you want. Hell, even the fat girl needs a husband." Laughter erupted. Men slapped tables. Someone whistled. In the corner. Ruth Winslow froze. The needle slipped from her fingers, thread dangling like a severed lifeline. She'd been mending a coat patchwork layers she'd stitched 100 times. Because throwing things away felt too much like giving up on herself, Grant set down his cards. The room didn't notice at first, too drunk on mockery to see the storm gathering in his silence. He stood, slowly, deliberately. The laughter began to die. "Then I'll marry her." His voice was flat, final. The way a man states the sun rises east. Silence crashed down like a felled tree. Kent's grin faltered, froze, cracked at the edges. Someone coughed. A chair scraped. Ruth's breath caught in her throat, trapped between disbelief and something dangerously close to hope. "You're joking," Kent said, but his voice had lost its swagger. Grant picked up his hat, dusted it once, twice, met Kent's eyes without blinking. "I don't joke about a woman's dignity." He walked out, didn't look at Ruth, didn't look back. The door swung wide, and cold October wind rushed in, scattering cards across the floor. Ruth stared at the closed door. The coat lay forgotten in her lap, half mended, like everything else in her life. For the first time in 10 years, someone had chosen her. She just didn't know why. 3 days passed before Grant appeared at the bakery. Ruth had convinced herself it was liquor-talking cruel men found sport in raising hope before crushing it. She kneaded dough with flour-white hands, working the rhythm her mother taught her press. Fold, turn. Press, fold, turn. Muscle memory against the ache of waiting. The door chimed. Grant stepped inside, hat in hand. No flowers, no pretty speeches. Morning frost clung to the windows. He smelled of leather and wood smoke. "I meant what I said." Ruth's hands stilled in the dough. She didn't turn around. "I need a wife." Grant continued. "You need a home. No charity. Partnership." The word hung between them, partnership, like something she'd only read about in borrowed novels. She turned, studied his face, weathered, honest, lonely in a way that mirrored her own. But she'd learned not to trust easy rescues. "Why?" Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Men don't choose women like me unless they want something cruel." Grant met her eyes, didn't flinch from the weight of the question. "I watched you mend that coat in the saloon, while other folks laughed. You kept stitching. You work while others gossip. You fix what's broken instead of throwing it away." He paused. "That's the kind of woman who survives winter out here." The words landed different than flattery. They saw her not the body the town mocked, but the hands that never stopped working. Her father appeared from the back room. Clyde Winslow had been half a man since his wife died. Grief folded him into something small and practical. He saw opportunity in Grant's offer the way drowning men see driftwood. 2 weeks, Clyde said, making the decision for her. Plenty of time to prepare. Ruth wanted to argue. Wanted to demand more time, more answers, more proof this wasn't another trap. But Grant was already reaching into his pocket, placing coins on the counter. "For the bread," he said. She nodded. He left. Later, counting the coins. She realized he'd paid triple. First, quiet kindness. First brick in a foundation she didn't yet believe in. She pressed her palm flat against the counter. Flour dust rising like snow. Maybe survival was enough. Maybe partnership could grow into something more. Or maybe she was a fool. Grant's ranch sat 10 miles outside Silver Ridge, where the land opened up wild and the nearest neighbor was a day's ride. Ruth arrived by wagon in late afternoon. sky heavy with the season's first snow. She saw the cabin first small, solid, built to withstand. Then the two rocking chairs on the porch, one worn smooth from use, the other gathering dust, untouched. Her chest tightened. Grant helped her down from the wagon, hands careful, impersonal. He didn't speak until they stood before the cottonwood tree, where a simple marker leaned against the wind. Sarah McCoy, 1881, beloved wife and mother. I loved her. Grant's voice was steady. She's gone. I'm not looking to replace her. He met Ruth's eyes. But this land needs tending, and a man alone becomes a ghost. Ruth understood ghosts. She'd been one for years, walking through town unseen, unheard, dismissed before she opened her mouth. I won't ask you to forget her, Ruth said quietly. I know. He handed her a key. But you deserve to know who you're standing beside. The cabin smelled of dust and loneliness. Ruth set down her bag and began working, scrubbing windows, sweeping floors, planting winter herbs in the small plot near the door. She baked bread her mother's recipe, and the scent transformed the space from shelter into something closer, to home. First night, Grant offered her the bedroom. He took a blanket to the porch despite the cold pressing down from the mountains. Ruth couldn't sleep. She lay in the bed that had been Sarah's, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she'd always be a replacement. Near midnight, she rose, pulled a quilt from the trunk, placed it on the porch rail where Grant sat, shoulders hunched against the wind. He didn't stir. She didn't speak. Morning came soft and gray. Grant woke wrapped in the quilt, no memory of pulling it close. He folded it carefully, left it on the rocking chair that had been empty for 6 years. Ruth saw it through the window, turned back to the stove, let herself hope. 2 days later, they married. The ceremony was brief, cold, silent. Reverend Morris rushed through the vows like a man late for supper. No guests, no music, just legal words that bound them in the eyes of God and the Colorado Territory. As they left the church, Sheriff Kent leaned against the post, toothpick between his teeth. Give it 3 months, he said, loud enough to carry. Ruth's hand tightened on Grant's arm. He covered it with his own, first time he'd touched her without necessity. Let's go home, he said. Home. The word felt like a dare. The town turned to ice. Ruth discovered it 3 days after the wedding, when she walked into the general store and conversation stopped like someone had cut the strings on a puppet show. Women she'd known her whole life suddenly found the floorboards fascinating. The shopkeeper, Harold Birch, looked straight through her. Help you! His tone said he hoped the answer was no. Flour, sugar, coffee. Ruth kept her voice steady. Same as always. We're out. He gestured vaguely at shelves clearly stocked with burlap sacks. Ruth didn't argue. She'd learned that lesson: young fighting disrespect only gave people more ammunition. She turned and walked out, spine straight, eyes forward. Grant noticed when neighbor Travis Dunn rode past without offering help with the fence line. When the bank manager Warren Kent Sheriff's cousin stopped by with sudden concerns about loan terms. Just ensuring you're stable, Warren said, eyes sliding over Ruth like she was livestock he wouldn't bid on. Given recent changes, Grant's jaw tightened. My accounts are current. My land is productive. We're done here. Warren left. Ruth watched from the window. They're punishing you for my choice, Grant said, standing beside her. They're punishing you for choosing me. Ruth corrected. There's a difference. That night, one of the calves took sick shivering, weak, refusing milk. Ruth sat up in the barn, coaxing it to drink, warming it with blankets, singing the songs her mother used to hum over bread dough. Grant found her at dawn, calf sleeping peaceful in her lap. He watched her for a long moment. Really watched, not the way the town did. Measuring and dismissing, but seeing. The way she worked without complaint. the way she gave without expecting return. "You saved him," Grant said. Ruth looked up, exhausted. Hay in her hair. "That's what you do. You keep things alive." Something shifted in Grant's chest, a door opening he'd thought nailed shut. That evening, for the first time, he asked about her life before. They sat at the table, bowls of stew between them. Ruth spoke slowly, testing each word before releasing it. "My mother taught me everything. Sewing, baking, healing. Said I'd need it when I had my own family." Her voice caught. "She died thinking I'd never have anyone to teach it to." Grant's hand stilled halfway to his spoon. "Teach me." Ruth blinked. "What, teach me?" he repeated. "I've been eating burnt beans for 6 years." She laughed. First real laugh since arriving. Sound like water over stones, clear. Unexpected. Beautiful. Grant smiled. Just a little. Just enough. The land outside didn't lie. It showed who worked and who just talked. Ruth was a worker, and Grant was starting to see that partnership might become something neither of them had words for yet. December brought the blizzard. It arrived without warning, sky turning from gray to white in minutes. Wind howling down from the mountains like something alive and angry. Snow piled against the cabin walls, burying the windows, sealing them inside. 3 days, maybe 4. Time blurred in firelight and forced proximity. Ruth mended shirts by the hearth. Grant carved a replacement chair leg at the table. Domestic rhythms settled between them past the thread. Stoke the fire, brew the coffee. Small intimacies that meant nothing and everything. On the second night, Ruth broke the silence. "I heard what he called me." At the saloon, she didn't look up from her stitching. "The fat girl." Grant's knife stilled against wood. "I know that's what I am to them." Ruth continued, voice steady despite the tremor underneath. "I've been invisible my whole life, until you." Grant set down the knife, stood, crossed to the fire. "I should have broken his jaw," he said quietly. Fury threaded through the words, not at her. At himself for staying silent when cruelty filled the room. Would have changed nothing. Ruth finally met his eyes. Firelight caught the unshed tears. "But you changed everything. You saw me." The confession hung between them raw, aching, true. A knock shattered the moment. Grant opened the door to the postal rider, half frozen, shoving a letter into his hands before disappearing back into the white. The letter was from Sarah's sister. Legal language, cold as the storm, contesting the marriage, claiming Ruth trapped him for inheritance, demanding the land returned to Sarah's family. Ruth read it over his shoulder, felt the world tilt. "If this costs you everything," she began. "You are everything." Grant turned, gripping her shoulders. Not rough, but firm, anchoring. "This house is just wood. You're what makes it home." The words broke something in Ruth, or maybe built something. She wasn't sure which. She leaned into him. Just a little testing. He didn't pull away. Outside, the storm screamed. Inside, the fire crackled. 2 people learning that shelter wasn't just walls and roof, it was this. Choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. Ruth fell asleep in the rocking chair near midnight, mending forgotten in her lap. Grant lifted the fabric carefully, covered her with a blanket. His hand lingered on her shoulder just a moment, just a breath. She woke, caught his tenderness in the firelight. He didn't pull away. She didn't ask him to. The wall between them cracked, not broken yet, but weakened enough to let warmth through. Storm showed you who built their house on rock and who built on sand. They were still building. But the foundation was holding. The barn burned on a night cold enough to freeze breath mid-air. Grant woke to orange light bleeding through the window. Then the screaming horses, panicked, trapped. He was out the door before thought could catch up to instinct. Ruth was faster. She ran toward the flames in her nightdress, barefoot in snow. No hesitation. Grant shouted stop. Wait. Too dangerous, but she was already inside. Smoke swallowing her whole. The heat was monstrous. Timbers groaned overhead. Ruth found the first stall, threw the latch, drove the horse toward the door, then the second, the third. Her hands blistered on hot metal. But she didn't stop. A beam fell. Missed her by inches. Grant lunged through smoke, found her wrist, dragged her out as the roof collapsed behind them. She fought him, 2 horses still inside, but he held tight, wrapped her in his arms, her weight precious cargo, not burden. They stood in the snow, watching 6 years of work burn to skeleton and ash. Ruth's hands were raw, skin peeling, blood mixing with soot. She shook not from cold, from rage. I should have been faster. You saved 4 lives. Grant's voice cracked. Nearly died doing it. The town doctor refused to come. Grant rode there himself, pounded on the door until Silas Greer opened, half-dressed, annoyed. My wife's burned. She needs help. Greer squinted past him at the horse, at Grant's soot-stained face. Can't spare time for a charity case. He started to close the door. Grant's hand shot out, holding it open. His voice dropped to something quiet and deadly. You took an oath. I took nothing that obligates me to serve every bomb. Grant didn't wait for the end. He turned and rode home, fury white-hot and controlled. He tended Ruth himself, drew water from the well, heated it carefully, cleaned the burns with cloth torn from his own shirt, applied salve he kept for wounded stock, wrapped her hands with strips of Sarah's old dresses, the only soft fabric available. Ruth wept, not from pain, though pain was there, searing, from shame. I'm why they hate you. Her voice broke. You'd have a life without me. Grant's hand stilled on the bandages. He looked at her, really looked hair wild, face streaked with ash and tears, hands ruined from saving what mattered. I'd have survival, he said quietly. You gave me a life worth living. The words settled between them, true as stone. Morning brought evidence. Boot prints in the snow near the barn's back wall. A kerosene can half buried in a drift. Grant recognized the print, Travis Dunn. Neighbor turned arsonist. Desperate for land he couldn't afford. He rode to the sheriff. Kent barely looked up from his breakfast. Not enough proof. Boot print matches. Can has his ranch mark. Could be anyone's boots. Could be any can. Kent forked eggs into his mouth. Maybe you got careless with a lantern. Grant leaned across the desk. You know what happened. Question is whether you're lawman or coward. Kent's face darkened. Careful. McCoy. Already been careful. Got me a burned barn and a wife who nearly died. Grant straightened. Mark my words, truth comes out. When it does. You'll remember you had a choice. He left Kent chewing his breakfast and his conscience. Fire don't care about your name or your past. Shows you who runs toward danger and who runs away. Ruth ran toward. That was all Grant needed to know. Ruth woke to an empty bed. She found him at Sarah's grave, kneeling in the pre-dawn gray, hat in hand. The mountains loomed behind him. Silent witnesses to private grief. She didn't approach, didn't interrupt. Just watched from the cabin door, breath misting in the January cold. Grant spoke to the stone. She couldn't hear the words, but she understood the shape of them: apology, release, permission to move forward. I held on too long, he said to Sarah's memory, afraid that living again meant betraying you. His voice broke. But she taught me something. Ruth. She taught me that honoring you means not dying with you. He stood, brushed dirt from his knees, walked back to the cabin. Ruth pretended to sleep. He stoked the fire, checked her bandages with gentle hands, whispered words he thought she couldn't hear. Bravest woman I've ever known. Morning came proper and bright. Grant saddled his horse, rifle across his back. "Going to town," he said. Ruth knew what that meant. Confrontation, maybe violence, definitely consequence. "Let me come." No, firm but not unkind. "You've bled enough for my choices." "There are choices now," Ruth said. "That's what partnership means." Grant studied her. Bandaged hands, steady eyes. A woman who ran into fire because saving things mattered more than safety. "Stay here," he said softly. "If I don't come back by sunset, take the horse and ride to the Doyles. Martha'll help you." He kissed her forehead. First time his lips touched her skin. Then he rode. Silver Ridge's main street held the usual morning traffic wagons. Horses, men conducting business. Grant tied his mount outside the sheriff's office and walked to the center of the street. Harlan Kent. His voice carried like church bells. People stopped, watched. Kent emerged, hand on his gun belt. This official business, official as it gets. Grant planted his feet. "Any man who insults my wife insults me. She saved my horses while you sat warm in your office. Where's your courage?" Silence rippled outward. Women paused mid-step. Shopkeepers leaned in doorways. Martha Doyle, the elder who'd seen 70 winters and buried 3 husbands, stepped forward from the crowd. "We'll trade with them," she announced, voice clear. "Been wrong too long." Her husband Henry nodded. "Should have spoken sooner." Another voice joined. Then another. "Not everyone. Not even most. But enough. A crack in the armor of collective cruelty." Kent's face darkened. "You're making enemies. McCoy already had them." Grant turned to leave, then stopped. "Difference is, now I know who my friends are." He rode home to Ruth waiting on the porch, rifle across her lap. Ready to defend or bury depending on how the day ended. He dismounted. Took the rifle gently from her hands. Set it aside. "Town's changing," he said. "Slow, but changing." Ruth stood. Wrapped her arms around him first time she'd initiated touch. He held her like something breakable and unbreakable at once. Sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is admit he was wrong. The town was learning that lesson. Grant and Ruth had already lived it. Spring arrived tentative and muddy. Snow melted into rivulets that carved new paths through the land. Ruth's garden pushed green through black soil, stubborn, hopeful, alive. The town noticed. Hard to ignore vegetables thriving where most folks barely coaxed survival. Women began visiting. First one, then another. Officially for recipes. But really for something else, companionship with someone who'd survived what they feared. Ruth welcomed them. Served bread and coffee, asked about their children, remembered names. She was building something, not forgiving the cruelty, but creating space for repair. Grant watched from the fields, saw Ruth laugh with Martha Doyle on the porch, saw the schoolteacher linger over a second cup of coffee, confession in her eyes. Change came slow as spring, but it came. Then Travis Dunn forced the reckoning. Town meeting, early March. The schoolhouse packed shoulder to shoulder. Travis stood before the assembly, voice loud with false injury. "Grant McCoy's negligence burned my fence line, spooked my cattle." He pointed an accusing finger. "I demand compensation, land or money." Grant rose from the back. Every eye turned. "You set that fire yourself." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Kent stood, hand raised. "Now that's a serious accusation." "Got proof." Grant dropped a burlap sack on the floor. Out tumbled a boot, a kerosene can with Dunn's ranch mark, and a signed statement from the postal rider who'd seen Travis near the property that night. Travis's face went white, then red. "He's lying. That could be anyone's. Boot matches the print I took in plaster. Can't fake that." Grant faced the crowd. "My wife nearly died saving horses from flames he set. Could have killed us both." His voice hardened. And this town's lawmen did nothing. Kent shifted uncomfortably. The assembly murmured anger, shame, confusion mixing. Martha Doyle stood. Arrest him. Harlan. Do your job or turn in your badge. Others joined her call. Not all. But enough that Kent had no choice. He moved toward Travis, hand on his gun. Travis Dunn, you're under arrest for arson and attempted murder. Travis bolted, got 3 steps before Henry Doyle tripped him, went down hard in the mud. Men hauled him up, dragged him toward the jailhouse. Grant turned to face the assembly. My wife is worth 10 of your approval. We'll thrive alone if we must. Silence held for a heartbeat. Then the schoolteacher stood. I was wrong, Mrs. McCoy. Forgive me. The preacher rose. Forgive us all. One by one, voices joined. Not everyone. Some faces remained hard, unrepentant. But enough changed that the air itself shifted. Ruth stood beside Grant, bandaged hands clasped in front of her. She met the eyes of those who'd shunned her. Didn't flinch, didn't gloat. Thank you, she said simply. Outside, the assembly broke into clusters, some angry, some relieved, all talking. Grant and Ruth walked to their wagon. Kent stepped in their path. McCoy, He cleared his throat. I was wrong about a lot of things. Grant studied him, saw a man wrestling with conscience. Words are wind, actions matter. Kent nodded, stepped aside. As they rode home, Ruth leaned against Grant's shoulder. Think it'll last? The ones who changed, maybe. Maybe not. He glanced at her. But we don't need their permission anymore. The measure of a town isn't its church. It's how it treats the least among them. Silver Ridge was learning. Slowly, but learning. Late May dressed the ranch in green and gold. Ruth's garden exploded with live tomatoes climbing stakes, beans winding up trellises, herbs spilling fragrant over stone borders. The barn, rebuilt with help from Henry Doyle and 3 other men who'd found their courage, stood solid and smelling of fresh pine. Ruth stood on the porch, hand resting on her swollen belly. 6 months along, the baby kicked regularly, now strong, insistent, already showing McCoy stubbornness. Grant emerged from the barn, saw her silhouetted against morning light, and something in his chest settled. Peace he hadn't known in 7 years. He climbed the steps, stood behind her. Began the morning ritual they'd built, braiding her hair with careful fingers. Something intimate and ordinary that meant they'd survived the winter and claimed the spring. Kicking again, he asked. Ruth guided his hand to the spot. Feel. The baby pushed against his palm. Grant's breath caught. Life, future, hope made flesh. Strong, he murmured. Like her father. Ruth tilted her head back, smiled. Or him, whoever they are. They're stubborn. Hoofbeats on the road interrupted. Martha and Henry Doyle arrived with a wagon full of supplies nails, canvas, rope. Behind them, 3 more wagons, neighbors. Some who'd stayed silent during the worst, now showing up to help. Heard you needed a new fence line, Henry called. Grant descended the steps, shook hands with men who'd once turned away. Some apologized outright. Others worked in silence, apology in their labor. Women gathered on the porch with Ruth, brought baby clothes, shared advice, asked about her health. She served lemonade, bread still warm from the oven, and let them rebuild what cruelty had torn down. By evening, the fence stood strong. The garden had been weeded, expanded, planted with flowers. Martha insisted. Every baby needs color. As the last wagon rolled away, Grant and Ruth stood in the yard, surveying work done by hands that had once condemned them. Think we can trust them? Ruth asked. Some. Grant pulled her close. But we don't need to. We've got us. inside. Ruth pulled something from the trunk. The coat from the saloon, the one she'd been mending the night everything changed. She'd transformed it into a quilt. Each patch telling story Grant's work shirt, her mother's apron, fabric from Sarah's dresses Grant had used for her bandages. Brokenness remade as warmth. For the baby, Ruth said, so they know where they came from. Grant traced the stitches. Hard way, he murmured. Only way worth doing. Ruth settled beside him. Easy things don't last. But what you build through a blizzard that stands forever? Night came gentle. They sat in the two rocking chairs, no longer one empty, one used, but both occupied, both needed. Stars emerged. Somewhere a coyote called. The land breathed around them, patient and eternal. You made me remember how to live, Grant said quietly. Ruth reached for his hand. You made me believe I deserved to... The baby kicked again. They laughed, foreheads touching. Two people who'd been ghosts learning how to be solid again. Years later, neighbors would speak of the McCoy Ranch, how it thrived when others failed, how the garden never stopped producing, how the couple who everyone thought would crumble became the bedrock the town rebuilt itself around. And in the house, children would play, wrapped in a quilt made from cast-off coats and old shirts, never knowing their warmth came from brokenness transformed, from two people who chose each other when choosing meant losing everything else. A house built in summer won't survive winter, but one built through the blizzard that stands forever. Grant and Ruth knew. They'd built theirs the hard way, and it stood. The end.